Good evening, everybody. Hi. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Carrie Weber. I'm the Executive Director of the Fairfield University Art Museum, and I'm so glad you're all here tonight for the opening festivities for Helen Glazer, Walking in Antarctica. So before we get to tonight's talk, I have a few brief remarks. We're so pleased to be presenting this stunning exhibition of photographs and sculpture based on Helen's travels in Antarctica in 2015. This exhibition was organized by the Mid-America Arts Alliance and is an adaptation of the artist's solo exhibition of the same title, held at the Rosenberg Gallery at Goucher College in Baltimore, Maryland. It was funded there in part by grants from the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance and the Puffin Foundation. Creation of this work was made possible in part by a Ruby's Artist Project grant, a program of the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance, conceived and initiated with funding from the Robert W. Deutsch Foundation and by a Puffin Foundation Artist Grant. We're very grateful to Helen for being here with us tonight to speak to us and to share the stories of how she created this amazing body of work. Here at Fairfield, I'd like to thank my fantastic museum team of Michelle DiMarzo, Megan Pacwa, and our newest team member, Heather Coleman, for all of their work in helping to make this exhibition and tonight's opening a success. I'd also like to thank Carrie Lunn, the Senior Administrator for the Fairfield Arts Institute, for her assistance with this evening's event. I also want to thank the team here at the Quick Center who accommodated a last-minute change of venue, because we had so many people sign up for this talk when we first put it online that we quickly outgrew the Diffley boardroom and had to move down here. So I apologize to all of you for the back and forth down here and then back up to Bellarmine for the reception and the opening, but we wanted you all to have comfortable seats. There will be a shuttle outside the doors if you don't want to drive up after the talk, so it's up to you. You can move your car or you can take the shuttle. We'll be in the lobby to help direct you, the whole museum team, so whatever you'd like to do. I also wanted to take a minute just to thank Lori Jones for her promotion to Director of Programming and Operations for the Cook Center. Before I bring Helen Glazer to the podium to speak to you, just a tiny bit more housekeeping. On your way out tonight, if you haven't had a chance to see Christy Rupp's exhibition in the Walsh Gallery, I want to encourage you to check it out. You can see it on your way to the shuttle or to your car, or on your way back down. It's open till 8 o'clock tonight. Both of our galleries, in case you haven't heard, are now open till 8 p.m. every Thursday night, thanks to a generous grant from the Art Bridges Foundation. So we had planned for both of these exhibitions to be on view simultaneously, as we really feel that they complement each other. You can see this most clearly in the ways that both of these women's artistic practices interrogate the impact of human activity on our natural landscapes. And you'll understand that more after you've seen both shows and you've heard Helen speak. As a side note, this is crazy, I have to share that we have just learned that Helen and Christy both attended the Maryland Institute College of Art at the same time, which is just so strange. This talk is being live streamed and recorded, so it will soon be available on our YouTube channel. If you have friends who couldn't see it, or if you want to watch it again, you can find it there. And information about the additional programs are on our Eventbrite site and on the exhibition webpage, so you can find them there. Now on to the main event. Helen Glazer's work in photography and photogram. Oh, I knew I wasn't going to get it. I practiced. How do you say it? Photogrammetry-based sculpture is informed by scientific insights into interacting forces affecting ecosystems and shaping landscapes, including the impact of human activity and decisions. She has spent her entire career since her early 20s as a working artist. Over time, her focus shifted from drawing and painting to painted sculpture, to a current emphasis on photography and photo-based sculpture, combining digital fabrication and hand finishing. She has also completed 2 large public art projects. Helen graduated cum laude from Yale University with a BA in art and earned an MFA from the Mount Royal School of the Maryland Institute College of Art, also studying at the renowned Skowhegan School of Art. Her works are in private and public collections, including the Center for Art and Environment at the Nevada Museum of Art. Helen Glazer's work has been exhibited nationally, including group exhibitions at the Delaware Museum of Art and the New York Hall of Science, as well as in the State Department's Art and Embassies program. She's published articles about art making and artists in magazines and journals such as Artes, Art Papers, and Feminist Studies, as well as over 30 catalog essays about artists for the Rosenberg Gallery at Goucher College, where she was the exhibitions director from 1986 to 1998 and shepherded the exhibitions program to regional prominence. Now please join me in welcoming Helen Glazer.
Hi. Let me get the clicker. Oh, there it is. Okay, well, welcome to Walking in Antarctica. So I'm going to give you an introduction to the exhibition that'll be here at the museum for the next several weeks. And I'm going to give you some insight into what made me want to go to Antarctica in the first place, what it was like to live and work in that cold and extreme environment for 7 weeks, and also how my project evolved in response to what I found there once I was there. I'll show you works that are in the show, and I'll also show you some photographs that are not in the show but that give some context, and I'll take some questions at the end. So when I first heard about the Antarctic Artists and Writers Program, I saw a call for applications. This is a program offered by the National Science Foundation, and my first thought was, Antarctica? Really? What would an artist even do there? My mental picture was flat and white, and I just couldn't imagine, unless maybe you were a minimalist. And, you know, it may not be surprising in a way that my impressions of Antarctica were so vague. Antarctica is uniquely disconnected from human history out of any kind of large region in the world. And this is the southern hemisphere of a globe. This is the South Polar region that was made in 1807. And as you can see, they didn't even know if there was land there. The whole thing is just labeled in, I didn't pick the pointer, there we go. The whole thing is just labeled Antarctic Ocean. And this was the state-of-the-art geographic information at the time based on the journeys of Captain Cook in the mid-1770s. And for decades, that was really all anybody knew. By 1927, here's the South Pole in another globe. And now they have the basic contours. They know there's a continent there. People landed there for the first time in 1895. So really, there was nobody set foot on Antarctica till 130 years ago. And, but even then, only those orange areas had been explored in any depth. So there was still a lot they didn't know. This is McMurdo's Station. And it was first constructed in 1955 by the Americans. And this is the main American research station in Antarctica. This is the one where I stayed most of the 7 weeks that I was there, except when I was at a field camp. At any given time, there were about 730 people living and working there. And the active part of the research season is mainly from like October to February. So anyway, getting back to the Artists and Writers Program, I was curious. So I looked up photos of Antarctica, and I realized that there were icebergs and there were glaciers, and these were related to forms that I was already interested in. So let me explain that. So about 20 years ago, I was doing painted wall reliefs that I was hand modeling and casting and painting. And I was basing them on sketches and photographs of forms in nature, such as seashells or botanical forms. And as I looked at these forms, I thought, I wonder what accounts for the way forms grow and develop in nature. and what accounts for the sheer variety of ways that they grow. So I started reading books on science for the layperson. And that led me to discussions of complexity theory and chaos theory, which talk about how forces act in a particular place, might produce a certain characteristic patterns, and also fluid dynamics, which is the study of how fluids move through space. So, for example, moving water, moving air. And one of the books I was reading proposed that you could think of water moving downstream and encountering obstacles as having a temporary, stable 3D form with surfaces and boundaries that didn't change much as long as the flow of water was consistent. So the water passing through is always changing, but the forms don't change much. And I took these two photos of a river 1 minute apart, and you can see they are virtually identical. And then I was also looking up fluid dynamics experiments. There's books that have pictures of them, and then I would read the captions to try to understand what the experiment was showing. So this is an example of how you have two streams of air that are coming from opposite directions, and there's a difference in pressure, and it causes it to roll up into these spiraling vortex rings and then become turbulent. So having these pictures and explanations in my head, when I looked up at the sky, I saw these things being played out on a gigantic scale in the sky, in the clouds. And so I started photographing cloud formations, and I thought, originally, I'll use these as studies for reliefs, but I really got interested in the sheer complexity of what was going on, and that would just be really impossible to model by hand. So I came up with the idea of printing them out and then delicately hand coloring them with pastel pencils to bring out the movement of the clouds through space and also the fractal forms that would arise in these situations. And so that's the full image on the left, and then there's the detail on the right. And so by the fractal images, I mean these sort of like repeating little forms or the repeating angles at which they're branching. And my reasoning at that then was, okay, so Antarctica, there's ice. Ice is a fluid, it's just frozen. And the whole landscape is being shaped by wind and water, so the movement of fluids. So I could expect to find forms aligned with what I was seeing in the sky, but I had certain advantages. If you've ever tried to photograph a cloud, you know that like 10 minutes later, it could be gone. Ice doesn't move. Also, I could walk right up to them, get close to them, and I could walk around them and photograph them from different angles. And it turned out that my intuition was pretty right on, because this photo I took inside of an ice cave in Antarctica, and really it isn't a huge leap from that to that. And by the way, this photo is also going to be the subject of an upcoming program here at the museum, so check the website for that if you're interested. In 2013, there was this technology that came online called photogrammetry, became available, and this was very exciting to me because now I could realize my dream of getting complex natural forms into 3D. And the way you do that is, so this is this demonstrates a little bit of how it goes. One of my early experiments, 2014. So, oops, wait a minute. Here we go. Wait a minute. All right. Up at the top here, you see that source photo. So this is a 37-foot-high rock cone in Yellowstone National Park. And then this grid of photos down here are still photos that I took with a regular camera, walking all the way around it. And then when you upload them to the photogrammetry software, it matches the points and creates a 3D file that really captures all the complexity of the original form. And so at the top, these are screenshots of that file brought into a 3D modeling program. So that's with the color information, that's without the color information. And I knew that I could take one of those files and put it in a machine that can read 3D files, like a 3D printer or a CNC router, and I could make sculpture from it. So that was my proposal to the Antarctic Artists and Writers program that succeeded. I suggested that I could 3D scan Antarctic ice and make sculptures from them. And then if that was not possible, I could also just photograph ice in its various manifestations. And there, I have landed in Antarctica in the middle of November of 2015. So I had just stepped off the military transport plane that brought us there from Christchurch, New Zealand. Once in Antarctica, I encountered some disorienting phenomena about being there. One is the sheer scale. It's so vast. It's very hard to judge distances. The air is also extremely dry and clear, so you don't have that haze. And once you get away from any kind of human-built environment, it's really hard to know how far away anything is. So here I'm standing on a modest hill, not a huge one, at the New Zealand base, which is called Scott Base. It's next to McMurdo Station. And I'm looking at a sea ice pressure ridge in the foreground. And then beyond that is the sea ice, and beyond that is an ice shelf. And then if you see where the sky meets the ice shelf, you see that row of colored dots. And that's the airfield where I flew in the previous photo. And how far away do you think that is? Well, it's 7 miles. So think about being on, not a big hill, just like a little hill in your neighborhood, and some point that's 7 miles away, and you can just see it there like that in the distance. So when you're traveling, sometimes it's very hard. You keep thinking, shouldn't we be there already? It's just things just stretch out. The other disorienting aspect about being there is the 24-hour daylight. So when I landed in November, the McMurdo Station website said next sunset, February 21st. So the sun never set the entire time I was there. So I took this picture of a glacier being reflected in the surface of a semi-frozen lake at 1:03 a.m., not p.m. I'm often asked about animals in Antarctica. Do you see any polar bears? No. There are no polar bears in Antarctica, only in the Arctic. The only mammals I saw were a type of marine mammal called a Weddell seal. And if you're on the sea ice and you're near a hole or a crack, you might see one poke its head out to take a few breaths before it gets submerged again. Or you might see it haul its 900-pound body out onto the sea ice to sleep. And I thought it was kind of amusing. This particular seal just slept through this whole commotion where there were like 2 scuba divers who came up on a snowmobile and an ATV with a third guy, and he helped them load up on equipment, and they all went down the hole. Now he's waiting for them. Seal slept through the entire thing. The only flying bird I saw was a skua. They are a type of gull. Not a gull, but they're like a gull-like bird. They're a predator. They eat penguin eggs and penguin chicks, and they can be pretty aggressive. I heard stories about them like slamming into people's head and making them drop a sandwich and then flying off with it. This is the closest thing to a plant I saw, moss, and I only saw it once. So there are no green plants. This is surprising to people. It was surprising to me. There's no green plants, there's no trees. Maybe you could, if you count microbes or microorganisms, you could count this sort of as a plant. This is called algal mat, this origami-like looking shape in the middle there. So this is formed like a mat of cyanobacteria, which they do photosynthesis, so maybe plant adjacent, and they form this mat. And you sometimes see that around some of the freshwater lakes there. Those cyanobacteria, there are scientists definitely studying them. They only come to life for about 8 weeks in areas that get a little damp from fresh water. There were a lot of phenomena there that I did not know I was going to see, and this is one, is a particularly huge sea ice pressure ridge. Actually, we did see a sea ice pressure ridge, that picture I took from Scott Base. This one was very large and elaborate, and so I'm up on a little bit of a hill looking at it. So an ice pressure ridge is when ice forms on top of a body of water, and then the chunks of ice are pushed up against the shore by the action of the tides. And, you know, if you live in a really cold place like, northern New Hampshire or maybe along, the coast of Maine, maybe you've even seen these, but they will not be this big. So look how large this is. So there's the snowmobile over here, one of the ones we rode in on. So this thing was like, 2 stories high. Like I said, big and elaborate even by Antarctic standards. And here's another section of it that I photographed for a photogrammetry set. And I called it Giant's Face because it reminded me of a giant face. And I made a sculpture from that is in the exhibition. You'll see it with one of the photos. So this is 3D printed plastic that I've hand painted. So yeah, we traveled by snowmobile often when we were on the sea ice. And actually, I did not take this picture, but that's me heading out onto the sea ice with a group on a snowmobile. They gave us snowmobile training, so I learned how to drive one. You'll hear, if you listen to the audio tour that is part of the exhibition, there are audio tour segments that talk about the different photos and sculptures in the show and what was going on, how we were traveling around. So you can listen to those. And you'll hear me talking about this tractor. You see over there, it says Gretel. There was also another one called Hansel. They get a little whimsical down there. This tractor was from the 1960s, so they really keep these things running as long as they can. And this truck, if they had to take a larger group around, this one I know dates back at least to the mid-70s. You'll hear me also talk in the audio tour about getting onto the lake ice via a rowboat on a rope pulley. And that was somebody's clever idea about how to get across that melted out area. When I had to travel to a field camp, they took us in a helicopter. And this was a photo I took out the window of the helicopter, flying over sea ice. You can see the propeller blur up there and the antenna in the corner. Every time I had a chance to go in a helicopter, it never got old. But mostly, I was walking in Antarctica. And that's why I called the show that. This is how I mainly experienced the landscape and how I photographed it. And I organized the exhibition as a series of walks through the Antarctic landscape into different environments. So especially if you listen to the audio tour, you will hear these stories and of the sort of little mini journeys that connect them. That's me actually photographing a rock for a photogrammetry set. So these video clips were taken in an area called the Dry Valleys. And so let's talk a little bit about the dry valleys. So the dry valleys are mostly ice-free. And this photo was taken from a helicopter as we approached a glacier called the Canada Glacier. So this is kind of typical dry valleys scene where you have mostly this gravel, but then you have these glaciers that come down these mountains and they come to rest in the valley. And then they've been feeding for eons these permanently frozen lakes. So the permanently frozen lakes, this one is called Lake Hoare. Don't worry, H-O-A-R-E, named after a man named Hoare. And this one's Lake Frixell, named after a geologist. And remember what I said about distances, like I think if we didn't stop, this probably would take 45 minutes to an hour to walk across. I did walk across it, and that is one of the stories in the audio tour. There's a field camp down here that you can't see, sort of where that green dot is. I'll show you that in a minute. But the lakes are maybe 80 to 100 feet deep, and they have a layer of ice on top that's 4 meters or about 16 feet thick. So here's the Lake Hoare Field Camp, and there's my tent. So typical field camp setup is everybody has their own tent for sleeping in, and then there's a communal hut where you can eat and cook, and it's heated, and there's electricity so you can work at your laptop. This side of the Lake Hoare side of the glacier was very rounded and smooth. I am guessing because the predominant winds coming down that valley are hitting that side of the glacier directly. And I did make a sculpture of that, which is also in the exhibition. And that's 3D printed plastic painted. And then when I walked over the other side and we got onto Lake Frixell, so this is more or less like 180 degrees, so just facing the opposite direction. And just as chaos and complexity theory would predict, the forces at work there are different, and so the forms are different. And you see, it looks like it isn't even the same glacier. They're spiky, there are these, there are these spires here. And they are fractal forms because they repeat at different scales, small ones, large ones, but very similar angles. All right, and there's the sculpture, which is in the exhibition as well. So I think the nice thing about having the photo and the sculpture is that the sculpture, you can experience it as an object in space, and you're not limited to the fixed point of view and the flat surface of a photo. So I'll use this rock and how I made a photogrammetry file of this to explain to you how I made the sculptures. So this rock is called a ventifact. This is another thing I didn't know I was going to see. There was one of the staff at McMurdo, once he understood what my project was, he said, well, if you're going to the Dry Valleys, I think you'd really like to see the ventifacts, and he was right. So the ventifact, these were very large boulders. Like this one was probably about my height. It's granite, and it's been eroded by the wind coming down the valley, probably being sandblasted, also the freeze-thaw cycle. And there are ventifacts in other windy places on Earth, but they're not usually this large. So I called this one bird ventifact because it reminded me of a bird. And I made a photo set by walking all the way around it, taking all these photos, uploaded them to the photogrammetry software and got this file. So now I had to decide where the edges of it were going to be. I needed to make a bottom. I needed to fill in the holes if I wanted to produce it as a sculpture. So what photogrammetry software does is it breaks up the whole surface into these tiny triangles. So if you want to fill in a hole, then you just add more triangles in 3D modeling software. So once I had the file all fixed up the way I wanted, those darker lines are where I sliced the file so that I could make sections that would fit into the 3D printer that was available to me. And so having printed all those sections in plastic, I brought it into my studio, and here I'm in the process of gluing it together, and I call this phase the Fisher-Price Let's Build a Ventivac kit. And then I painted it once it was glued together. So when you see this in the gallery, you know, as you walk around, notice how it changes and presents you with just different profiles and different forms as you move around it. So it offers a kind of different experience, which I think is a feature of good sculpture. Other ice formations I did not know I would see are these, they're called ablated ice formations, and they were on top of Lake Hoare. So the field camp manager had put down these planks to get over some thin ice on the edge of the lake, but then once you're on the lake, you're on that 16-foot thick layer of ice and you can walk around. And there I found these really interesting little pavilions and structures, not very high, maybe, you know, knee-high to waist-high. And the explanation I was given for these is that that layer of ice on top of the lake, it's always forming at the bottom, like where it's underwater, the ice forms. And then the top layer will go straight from solid to gas without passing through a liquid phase when it's extremely cold. And then you also have the gravel blowing from the surrounding hills onto the lake. And so the combination of all these factors, you end up with these really interesting little structures. And you can see that, so in the summertime in Antarctica, so it's getting into maybe the upper 20s, maybe even around 30, there will be some melting. You see the icicles there, and the water is dripping onto the gravel that is on top of the ice layer. So you get these little thin sheets of ice forming as well. So this was rather low, but I peered inside and photographed the ice inside. And then just looking straight down, there were these thin layers of ice that had these designs, and I photographed a number of these. There's this one and a few others in the show, and I called this one Skua because it reminded me of a bird in profile, so I named it after the skua bird. I did not have room to include blood falls in the show, but I want to show it to you because it's just very interesting. So here we're approaching in a helicopter, and so you see this orangey red area, and you might think at first, well, that looks like, you know, some kind of colored soil or dirt, but it isn't. It's actually ice. So that is orange and red ice, and it's been stained by saline and iron oxide that have seeped up through the soil and given it this orangey color. And it's a very rare phenomenon. It's of interest to the scientists, both in understanding the past geological history of this part of Antarctica and also looking for microbes that were, you know, small critters that might be able to live in that unusual environment. And this is a specially protected area, so I had to request a permit before I went to Antarctica in order to be able to go there from the National Science Foundation. And because my project had to do with photographing ice, they did issue me a permit, so I was really fortunate that I got to go up close like this. Another one of the walks in the show is into the Erebus Ice Tongue Cave. So you will see some pictures that I took inside the cave, but not the pictures I took outside, so I just wanted to show you the one at the top. So this is Mount Erebus up here, and this is it on a satellite map. And so Mount Erebus is the southernmost active volcano in the world, and it is 12,500 feet high, and by far the biggest thing for many miles around. And off of Erebus, you can see this glacier that comes out onto the ice, the sea ice. This is all sea ice here, and that's called the Erebus Ice Tongue. And so that's what you see here is we are walking towards that general area down this red flagged path to a little hole that was no more than waist high, where there was a cave that they allowed people to go in for a few weeks out of the year. I was there at the right time. So the first time I went with a group, and we go up to this little hole, and they say, okay, you're going to slide in on your belly about 8 feet down, and then you'll be able to stand up. And sure enough, there I was inside, and I'm looking back up towards the opening there. On the way out, I looked up at the ceiling and photographed the ice filtering through the ceiling and these ice formations hanging above me. And I went back just by myself with a mountaineer a second time, and he brought some lamps with him. And one of the things I realized was instead of trying to photograph them with a flash, it was much more effective to have him take the lights and backlight the features or light them from the side. And that really illuminated the structure and also the individual crystals in a really interesting way. And he was totally fascinated by the enormous size of the crystals in this cave. This was his first season down in Antarctica. He picked this one up off the floor and asked me to take a picture of it in his gloved hand. He said, "My ice nerd friends won't believe this." And so let's take another walk, and this is into the Cape Royds penguin colony. So these are Adelie penguins. We are following them over this volcanic landscape towards their nesting area, past a sign saying permit only, but I did have a permit because I was staying with penguin scientists. I know, they're so endearing. And there are some videos in the gallery of penguin behavior that you will be able to look at too. So the penguins were nesting while I was there. They were sitting on eggs. Most of them had 1 or 2 eggs in their nest. The nests are made out of little pebbles, and they nest in these groups called subcolonies. So here's one here. There's another one kind of up there. And every other day, one of the scientists would walk around with a notebook and count nests and count eggs and basically see what the penguins were doing. And if scientists spotted a banded bird, they could make note of that particular individual. So this bird would have been banded in a previous season when it was a chick. This study had been going on at the time for 19 years, and so long-term studies of a population like this can help people understand how the ecosystem is responding to changes in the environment or changes in the ocean conditions. This is typical nesting behavior, although this penguin is too young to mate, but he's just practicing. So he's picking up pebbles and dropping them in a pile. The penguin couples take turns sitting on the nest. So while one is sitting on the eggs, the other member of the couple will go down to the ocean to feed. So they'll tend to congregate together in a group on the edge of the ice. And then when there was a number of them there, they'll all jump in more or less as a group. And so this photo is in the show, but I'll also show you a photo I took about 2 seconds before. So this, over here on the right, this is penguin Olympic diving technique. So notice nice vertical position, toes are pointed, a bit of a splash, but still an excellent dive, right? I didn't know that penguins could swim so fast or that they could leap out of the water like dolphins. And the last day I was there, I was so determined, I really wanted to see a chick, and I knew I was going to have to leave the following day, and I was really disappointed I hadn't seen a chick. I'd seen a lot of eggs and no chicks. And I went out, and that story is also in the audio tour, and just when I was about to give up, I heard peeping, and I saw this scene. I took this picture, and then I turned on the video, which is also in the gallery, and you'll see the penguin parent feeding the chick. So, why does the National Science Foundation send artists and writers to Antarctica? Well, it's this talk, it's the exhibition in the gallery, and it's other situations where I've had the opportunity to exhibit work from this project and get it out to a broader public who, let's face it, most people don't read scientific papers. And scientists know this, and so if they want their work to have a broader impact, to get out to people, it's creative artists are one way, and also to build support for the mission of Antarctic science, and also for the preservation of Antarctica as a scientific preserve. Because what you may not know is that since 1959, there has been an Antarctic treaty which nations of the world agreed that there would be no military activity, no commercial exploitation, and environmental rules that everybody would agree to avoid contaminating the continent or avoid disturbing the environment any more than we have to do the work. And so the mission is science, and but we are, the artists and writers, kind of emissaries in between to you all. And I think that's something that environmentalists and preservationists have long understood, even back in the 19th century, that vivid images help bring a remote place closer to people, a place that most people will never visit or see. It builds a kind of connection that makes people care. And certainly now we also understand that what happens in Antarctica, that the ice there has effect on the climate here, and it has effect on sea level. And so if we lose too much ice in the Antarctic and the Arctic, we're going to see global sea level rise. I mean, we've already seen some, but significant ice loss will cause significant sea level rise, and this kind of research helps us understand what's happening there and how to prepare. So I hope that through my work I can leave you with vivid images that give you some kind of feeling of connection to Antarctica. And I like this quote by a sustainability advocate named Lance Hosey. He wrote, "When we treasure something, we're less prone to kill it. So desire fuels preservation. Aesthetic attraction is not a superficial concern. It's an environmental imperative. Beauty could save the planet." And so I hope I've put more of a human face on Antarctica and filled in a little bit of the blank spot at the bottom of the globe. Thank you. Thanks.
If you have questions, can you come to the mic because we're recording this and everyone would like to hear your questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Now I'd love to go there. I hope you believe that there are no such thing as stupid questions.
I don't, no.
Good.
I've probably asked all of them myself. So.
Is there an equivalent of the northern lights in the southern sky?
Yes, there is. And of course, you know, I was not there to see that because you have to be in that phase where it's 24-hour darkness, so there is a phase of that, but yeah, they have the same kinds of auroras there. And you know, probably can locate photos of that on Instagram. I know I've seen them. You know, there's people who winter over, a very small group. McMurdo Station, I think they keep about 100 people there who winter over to basically first of all, I guess, to make sure that everything is safe, that nothing burns down, and that also they get the station ready for the next research season. So sometimes those people have photographed auroras.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you experienced any scary moments during your 7 weeks, like getting face to face with an animal that you were like, oh my God, I didn't expect it was going to be there, or anything scary that may have happened, or challenging to your body, or anything like that.
Oh yeah, there were a couple. There was one moment where, you know, because I was not an expert at setting up those tents by any means, and when I got to one of those camps, I can't remember exactly which one, but it might have been the Penguin Colony. It was so windy. And so the mountaineer was helping me, but the thing was like a sail. And we were like, you know, trying to wrestle it back down. So, yeah, I didn't want to lose my tent. But we did get it together. The other moment was it was sort of getting a little late in the season to go on the sea ice, but we headed out to this spot, myself and a mountaineer, because somebody told us there was some interesting ice, and it was kind of across the McMurdo Sound. And we started to encounter some like melt pools. And so we were each on a snowmobile, and he's ahead of me, and all of a sudden his gets stuck. Like the skis get stuck, and it's like tilted up at an angle. And so he can't get it out. So he, you know, he's trying different things, and finally he says, okay, we maneuver my snowmobile in front of it, and he took like rope and like canvas straps, and he tied his snowmobile to mine, and he's on his. He says, all right, I'm gonna start mine up, you start yours up, and when I say go, gun it. And I'm like, okay, I'm pulling your snowmobile out. I'm not like an expert snowmobile driver, but I was like, all right, I gotta do this thing. And it lurched a little bit, and then we did it a couple more times and got it out. So I wasn't scared that we'd be stranded there because, you know, we had two-way radios and we weren't that far away from McMurdo's station, but I know he really wanted to get it out because his fellow mountaineers would have teased him no end if he didn't. So, Yeah.
Hello, Helen.
Hi.
I would like to know, how far did you venture off of the base? Because you talked about distances.
Yeah.
How far did you go? And also, my second question is, what was the temperature for most of the time when you were there, since it's summertime?
Right, right. When I got there, it was about 10 degrees, and it was in the low teens at first, just for a few days. And then it seemed to warm up to usually was in the 20s. So it was actually, especially if there was no wind, it was very bearable. If it was very windy, it could really feel cold. But I'd say that, and of course, the temperature doesn't fluctuate a whole lot because the sun never goes down. It might get a little weak, but it doesn't really go down at night. So it was temperature. Oh, and how far? Yeah, see what. I don't know the precise distances, and we're traveling on snowmobile, so, we're not going that fast. I mean, there were times where, like, riding for an hour, probably going 15 miles an hour to get somewhere. And I'd say it probably took about an hour to drive to that, to ride to that ice cave. So there were excursions like that. Sometimes, though, hiking, we're just hiking all day. Like, the time we walked over, I went with a field camp assistant, and we walked up this hill, over the Canada Glacier, down to the other lake, got onto the lake, took the photos, got back. That was an all-day, we were out for hours. So there were times where I was out just all day long, like just hiking out somewhere and then photographing and then coming back. So it was, yeah.
My question is about the lighting there. Everything is white and bright while you're there, if there are no clouds. Did you have any practice before going there to take pictures in that kind of an environment? And what was it like when you actually got there to do those pictures?
Yeah, sometimes it was white and bright. Sometimes it did get overcast. And actually, you can see this picture that I left up here. This was a very unusual day. It snowed in the dry valleys, and it snowed with a few inches of kind of a wet enough snow that that's a scientist and her 3 grad students, and they were normally going out on the lake ice and lowering equipment into holes in the ice. Actually, one of those photos that you saw with the light going down. Well, they couldn't really do much that day, so they made a snowman and put it on top of the survival box. But that's very unusual. But sometimes it could get foggy and cloudy. But yeah, it was bright, and that was challenging sometimes, especially like photographing the Ventifest, because this was in such stark shadow. Just sometimes I had to think about, should I do some flash fill to try to get a little more dimension there? But it was, so that I think was part of the challenge, is like how to deal with those strong shadows sometimes. But that night that I took the photo of the glacier being reflected, it was just gorgeous, gorgeous light. And I actually say this in the audio tour, it was 11:30, and that was the same day that I had done that long hike, been out for like hours and hours, like 8 hours or something hiking. And so I was pretty tired. It was like 11:30 at night, and the light was so beautiful, and I just thought, and it's just hitting that side of the glacier, and I thought, I should just take advantage of this. So I just stayed up till like 1:30 in the morning taking pictures, and I was really glad, because the next 2 days, the light was sort of flat and blah. So, sometimes it could get overcast or foggy, actually, the day that this all happened with the snowstorm, they flew me from this field camp to another, this lake to the next lake. And then the pilot had to just sit and wait for, I think, like 4 hours, because they said it's too foggy over the sea ice for you to fly safely. So he just kind of hung out in the hut until he was cleared to fly. So it can fog up.
So over the time you were there, I'm sure you met a lot of interesting scientists, and some of them might have been surprised to have an artist amongst them. So could you give one or two examples of when your vision as an artist and their understanding as scientists, where it overlapped and what you learned, where going back and forth with a person, you got some insight into the experience that you were having?
Yeah. Well, one thing I like about going out with scientists is that you hear about how they're perceiving the world, and so then you notice the things that they're noticing and attend to the things they're attending to. And they also, at McMurdo, they would have these informal science talks on Sunday nights, where people would just get up and give a talk, and so I would learn about things that some of these people were studying. The penguin scientist, this guy David Ainley, who had been he had started the study and he'd been running it for many years. He was a really interesting guy to talk to. I asked him about the penguins and climate change, and he said some interesting things, like there were winners and losers in climate change, and that they were seeing some penguin populations in certain locations grow, and this one at Cape Royds had declined some, and and he was interested in the whole food web and how that impacted things. The other thing that was kind of an interesting moment was that photo of lake ice. Let's see if I can get back to it. There's a photo I took. Okay, that one. So I sat down with two glaciologists and their PhD students and showed them all like a bunch of my ice photos, and they were really interested in what I had photographed. And I said, "Can you explain what's going on there?" And they kind of laughed and said, "Well, we study sea ice, and that's lake ice." But then one of them did send me a link to a website that talked about different types of lake ice, and I did find some of those ice designs on that site. But one of them then said, what might have happened is that the wind might have scalloped the surface of it, kind of like in this wave-like pattern, and then some water might have frozen on top of it, and maybe that's why you got this sort of blobby forms. But and that lake actually was in the penguin colony. It was a little inland fresh lake. But yeah, and that's understanding what happened, what the ablated ice formations were like, and what they were doing. But I was sort of surprised sometimes. Like I said to the one of the soil scientists at Lake Hoare, a guy who I walked around on top of Lake Hoare with, and I said, so do you have pictures of he was studying nematodes and microorganisms live in the soil. I said, do you study them under the microscope? He said, no, we mostly just sequence their DNA, but sometimes the mountaineers or field camp assistants or other people who I was hiking with, I'd say, look, I know I'm spending a lot of time photographing this stuff, and they were like, no, it's interesting to see what you're looking at. It makes me look at it differently. So they were finding I was attending to things that they might not really think about in their environment, which was interesting to me and a little surprising.
I think with that,
Thank you.
Hi, Helen. I have a question. So where is this all leading you? We see how you started in the forms and the fauna and the clouds and the ice. Is there a next step in all of this? What does the future hold for you and your artistic?
Right now, I'm working on a project in Greenland. Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I'll talk to you. I think they want to move things along, but I will.